Lost dog signs keep appearing in my neighborhood, but the thing in the picture isn't a dog. I live in middle of nowhere, Great Plains, aka northwestern South Dakota. It's not the worst place to live, I guess, if you like corn, but as you can imagine, not a lot goes on up here. Not much changes in my static little world, but when something new emerges from the monotony, I take notice, as in the case of the sign I saw about 3 years ago. It was a Friday night in late October, and I was driving home from a party at around 10 p.m. I had just reached the most isolated portion of my drive, a winding forest road that has more deer than cars using it on any given day, when my headlights illuminated a flyer posted to the trunk of an elm tree. As I passed by, I saw the words, "Lost Dog," along with a photo, presumably of the animal in question. Now, the location of the flyer was already strange enough to give me pause, but from my brief glimpse, the photo was even stranger. Maybe I was tired from a long day, or maybe the printer had messed up that particular flyer, but the picture hadn't looked like a dog at all, more so like a random assortment of shapes. Like I said, not much happens in my town, and the flyer was probably the most interesting thing that I'd seen all month. There was a turnout just after the elm, so I slowed down, pulled over, and stopped my car. I grabbed the flashlight I always keep in my console and got out to take a look. The flyer was even stranger up close. For one thing, there was no contact information, and the reward seemed exorbitant for another. The photo itself was also bizarre. Do you remember that AI-generated image shared on Twitter a couple years back with the caption, "Name one thing in this photo"? That's what the so-called dog reminded me of. A bunch of colors and shapes that looked like they should have been recognizable, but weren't. It had a short description of the dog beneath the photo. John Shepherd, mix white coat, brown hood, blue eyes, $10,000. Weird name for a dog. I chalked it up to an art piece, which helped dispel some of the unease that had begun to build in me upon staring at the photo. A part of me wanted to take the flyer, but I didn't want to be selfish with the artist's work, so I contented myself with the photo. Just as I slipped my phone back into my pocket, the sound of snapping twigs made me start. Maybe the deer want to look at the art too, I thought, shining my flashlight into the trees. I waited for a moment, scanning the forest with bated breath. But even though it had sounded like there was an animal right behind me, I saw nothing. I returned to my car after that and continued home. The next day, I gave my buddy Eric a call, hoping to catch him for drinks at our favorite brewery. Halfway through the call, I remembered the photo I'd taken of the lost dog flyer and opened my photo gallery so I could send it to him. To my disappointment, the photograph I'd taken was completely black. Either I'd had my thumb over the lens or the photo had somehow gotten corrupted. It was a little strange, but I've never been very tech-savvy, so I dismissed it as a glitch and told Eric where to look if he was ever returning to town from that direction. As it turned out, I didn't have to wait until my next out-of-town drive to see the flyer again. The following evening, Eric and I were walking back to our cars from the brewery. Across the street, stapled to a telephone pole, I noticed a familiar flyer and quickly pulled him over to point out the artwork. I was all smiles as I showed him, excited that someone was using our town as a canvas for their project, and even more excited that I'd been one of the first to notice it. This flyer was just as devoid of information as the first, and featured the same abstract mess of shapes for its dog. Eric's always been more cultured than myself, more inclined to be interested in art history and that sort of thing, so I was interested to hear his take on the piece. When I turned to get his reaction, though, he looked more unsettled than amused. "What up?" I asked him. Instead of answering, he just shook his head. "Nah, man, you'll think I'm crazy." I tried pressing him a bit more, but when it became clear that he wasn't going to divulge the source of his apprehension, I let it go. Before I continued towards my car, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of my shoes, which showed up in my photo gallery without issue. Then, I pointed my phone at the flyer, aimed, pressed the capture button, and nothing. Again, the photograph was completely black. When I got home that night, I went down a rabbit hole of anti-surveillance patterns, aka designs created for the express purpose of confusing cameras and facial recognition technology. Apparently, Apparently, anti-surveillance fashion is already a big thing in some parts of the world, so it's likely that the lost dog artist used one of those patterns in their piece, explaining why I can't get a good photo of the flyer. It didn't explain Eric's reaction, though. I fell asleep wondering if my friend was seeing something that I wasn't. For the next few days, more lost dog signs continued to appear around town, never in high-traffic areas or obvious places. I found one behind the bleachers at the community soccer field, and another tucked behind a different flyer on a public bulletin board. Whoever this artist was, they were no Banksy. They seemed more keen to set up an Easter egg hunt than to make a bold public statement. On the following Saturday, while on a hike, I was surprised to find a "Found Dog" sign taped to a picnic table in a quiet clearing off of the main path. I was pleased at the sight. I was starting to think that the art project was meant to encourage the residents of our town to better appreciate their surroundings, and that my attention to detail was paying off as a result. Even more pleasing was the fact that this sign had a phone number to call on it. The sign had no picture, just the words, "Found Dog, John," along with the number. Out of curiosity, I gave it a call. After 3 rings, someone picked up. I said nothing at first, wondering if I was about to speak to the artist themselves or simply hear some kind of pre-recorded message. After a moment, I heard a very strange voice. "Looking for a dog?" it said. There was some kind of heavy filter on the voice. It was staticky and guttural, and seemed like it had been pitched down considerably. In a strange way, it reminded me of a large dog growling. "Yeah, I'm looking for John." "What's the word?" asked the voice. "The word?" I thought, looking over paper in front of me and trying to remember the exact phrasing of the lost dog flyer. Presumably there was some kind of key phrase I had missed. "Shepherd," I guessed, and the person on the other end of the phone hung up. I tried calling back, but they didn't answer again. I put my phone away, disappointed, and took a seat atop the picnic bench. The sun was beginning to set, and a cool breeze had begun to sweep in from the north, whistling as it wound its way through the trees. I lowered my eyes from the pink and orange sky, staring into the tree line at the far end of the clearing. There was an animal peeking out through the brush. It was difficult to tell what exactly it was at such a distance, but it looked like a coyote, which my state has no shortage of. It was standing eerily still. I raised my hand slightly and waved at the creature as a joke to myself. And then the thing stood up on 2 legs. It wasn't an animal at all, I realized, but a person, clad head to toe in black and wearing a dog mask over their face. The person turned their back to me and walked deeper into the trees. Needless to say, that was not a comforting thing to witness. I left quickly after that, half jogging back to my car and glancing over my shoulder every few minutes. If I'd seen a person in a dog mask traipsing through the forest a week ago, I would have laughed. I would have assumed they were some kind of LARPer, rare as those might be in rural South Dakota. After my strange phone call, though, the sighting felt more sinister than funny. Was that the person I'd just been on call with? If so, had they seriously just been standing there waiting for someone to see their found dog flyer? The next day, as I visited my usual weekend haunts, I realized that the lost dog signs had been torn down. I guessed that the art project had reached its end, even though it seemed like a remarkably short run. I was disappointed that nothing more had come of it, and that I would never get answers regarding who was behind the flyers, but I probably would have moved on with my life and forgotten all about it if it weren't for the visitor I received that night. It was around midnight. I was at my computer, playing video games and trying not to think about work in the morning when I got a text from Eric. Oddly enough, he asked if he could come over, and it was such an uncharacteristic request that I figured there was something wrong. I said yes, and he showed up at my door 20 minutes later. He looked a wreck. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were red, and his whole demeanor was nervous and fidgety. When he walked into my house, he held his phone in one hand and a rolled-up piece of paper in the other. "You're not going to believe me, man. You're going to think I'm going crazy," he said after declining both my offers for a glass of water and for a seat on my couch. I assured him that he could trust me, that I would take his word seriously. After a moment, he unrolled the piece of paper in his hand to reveal one of the lost dog flyers. "This is me," he said. I was taken aback. "What? You made the signs?" "No." He tapped on the picture in the center of the flyer. "This is a photo of me." I looked back and forth between his face and the flyer. I squinted, I unfocused my eyes, I looked at the photo from different angles. No matter what I did, the dog in question didn't resemble a human being in the slightest, much less the familiar face of my friend. I gave what was probably a very awkward laugh. "Okay, man, you got me. Very funny." Instead of breaking character and laughing along with me, Eric unlocked his phone and opened Instagram. Once in the app, he navigated to his profile and clicked on his most recent post, which was a selfie from last year. He held up his phone next to the flyer. "It's hard to tell, but I swear to God this is me. It's my last photo with a filter on it to break it down into shapes. You see this white part, the circle and the rectangle under it? That's my face and neck. And these dots, the little blue ones here and here, those are eyes. And the brown part up here is hair. I swear I thought I was losing it, but everything lines up." I took the flyer and phone from his hands and tried to line up the shapes. It might have been the power of suggestion, but the more I looked between them, the more I started to see a match. "Also," he continued, "since you showed me this flyer, I've been hearing all sorts of weird shit. Outside my house at night, I keep hearing sounds like, I don't know, an animal or something. I thought a family of raccoons moved in, but it just doesn't sound like raccoons. Have you checked for tracks?" "Yeah, but you know we've got a grass lawn right up to the porch. I see indents, but it's not like I can see marks." Eric shook his head. "Last night, I could have sworn I heard people talking, but I couldn't tell you a thing that was said. Maybe these flyers have me paranoid." I thought about the person I'd seen on my hike. Whether or not it was really an altered photo of Eric in the flyers, there was undoubtedly something strange going on in our town. I was quickly starting to regret wishing for some more excitement. "Tell you what," I said. "I've got some extra trail cams. How about tomorrow morning on my way to work, I stop by you and set some up? I'd like to get to the bottom of this as well." Eric accepted my offer and left my house a little calmer than he'd entered it. Just for the hell of it, before I went to sleep, I tried giving the number on the found dog flyer one more call. This time, I got an intercept message telling me that the number had been disconnected or was no longer in service. The next morning, I went to Eric's house as planned. I rang the doorbell and waited. When he didn't answer, I tried knocking instead. Still no answer. I waited for a total of 10 minutes outside his front door, knocking and sending him a few texts. I didn't immediately panic as my friend was notorious for sleeping in and showing up late to events. I left him a voicemail stating that I had to leave for work, but would check in on him in the evening. It was only when I finished my workday and saw that my messages remained unread that I started to worry. I called his neighbor and asked her if she'd seen him, and when she said no, I asked her to do a wellness check of her own. Luckily, she had a spare key, and so I accompanied her to Eric's house. We didn't find Eric inside, nor did we find any signs of a struggle, but we found everything else: his keys, wallet, phone, even his shoes. It was that discovery that made me realize I had to get the authorities involved. Though I had never spoken to police before in all the years I'd lived there, I drove down to the station and reported my friend missing. It's been 3 years since Eric disappeared. In all this time, I haven't received any word from him, nor have the police been able to make any breakthroughs. I'm not sure if I should be happy or sad. On one hand, I'm grateful for the ambiguity. Who knows? Maybe Eric eloped to the Bahamas with a gorgeous woman and is happily living out his days by the shore as we speak. On the other hand, the events leading up to his disappearance seem to point to something more sinister. Eric is a good friend of mine and a good man besides, and I pray that wherever he is now, that he's all right. The years have gone by in a blink. This town has always been oppressively unexciting. Even more so now that the one guy who could kick my ass in billiards has dropped off the face of the earth. Not much changes in my static little world. But when something new emerges from the monotony, I take notice, as in the case of the sign I saw last night. It was early in the morning, and I was taking the Old Forest Road back into town from a friend's party. Same emptiness. Same stretch of road. It might have been the exact same elm, too. In any case, as I drove in silence, a lost dog sign caught my eye. Posted against a tree at the edge of the road, it read, John Shepherd, mix white coat, brown hood, brown eyes, $10,000. Beneath the text was a photo. Though abstract and blocky, I couldn't help but note a striking similarity between it and the last photo of myself I'd posted online.